Hey guys, it's Ornlu, and as of a couple days ago, the Open Classic has just concluded, and so it's time to do my normal tournament recap, overview, guide, whatever. I ramble about the tournament for a little bit, and then for some reason you guys enjoy that. But regardless, this one is going to be a little bit different because, in case you did not know, I myself was a part of the organization for this event, so it's going to be a little bit of like a reflection. This is the first new S tier event since Red Bull Wololo 1 in terms of it's not an iteration of a previous event. So there were some bumps. There were, a few things that were a bit awkward that in future editions of this, if they do happen, we'd like to change. But overall, I was really, really happy with the tournament. And I think a lot of people were saying that, this is some of the best Age of Empires they've been seeing in a very long time. And I agree. I was casting, as much as possible. And yeah, there were just so many great things about this tournament that I do think that they, overcame the speed bumps, but we'll get into those in just a second. So first, also, I don't have like a fancy stats spreadsheet, so I'm afraid you'll just have to listen to my voice. But yeah, let's go jump into the results real quick, just to, go over that. So obvious spoilers. If you don't want to be spoilered as to the results of the event, click away. 3, 2, 1. All right, so here we are with the bracket. I guess I should just say the way that this tournament was set up is that it's a one weekend huge open qualifier bracket thing. And that's not something that we're too used to in the AoE community. It was, hosted by Viper, but it wasn't really centered around Viper since Viper himself was playing. So it's just a little bit different than what people were used to. It's all about just like, hey, you have everyone signs in on Friday, and then it's just a big, slog of matches, and then whoever comes out on top on Sunday is the winner. And if you wanted to go to if you want to see different series because they were all happening simultaneously until the last day, you had to go to different streamers who I think we did our best to make sure that we covered as many matches as possible, at least, within reason. So that was it was different, and I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But of course, the results here, Mr. Yo did end up winning over Leary 4-2 in his first big tournament win since Red Bull Wololo 1. So, obviously, whenever there's a new S-tier tournament, Mr. Yo shows up and dominates. But still, there were some other notable performances. Jordan got 4th place. Not too bad for him. Tato, a resurgent Tato, almost even beating Mr. Yo in the semifinal. Great result from him. The Viper did end up narrowly losing to Mr. Yo in the quarterfinals, which I'm sure is going to be a lot of, disappointment to Viper and Viper fans, especially considering that, he was the one who hosted the event. But unfortunately for him, he was relegated to casting the final day. Kapach making a top 8 is a good result for him. Doubt Leary game number 2 on Nomad. My personal vote for the best game of the tournament. That is also on my YouTube channel. Nikov top 8. And that's even some smaller results like Project Belgium hitting top 16. Not at all bad. Same thing with Vodka L. And other stuff like that. So overall, I think the biggest takeaway for the tournament, beyond the results themselves, there were so many close sets, like 3-2, 3-2, 3-2, 2-3, 3-2, 2-3, 3-2, 3-2. Another one, 1, 2, 3. I didn't count that in my head, but that's a lot of very close sets. There were so many really close, evenly fought matches in this event, and that I think is it was the best part of the Open Classic, at least in my eyes, is that there were so many really close and exciting and compelling matches. And if just like a few things had gone differently, the top 8 would look like completely different. So is this the tournament that's like, okay, this is the overall best Age of Empires player in the universe? No, it's, who is the best this weekend? And in this case, it was Mr. Yo. And, if you look at the top players, the overall top players certainly all did end up performing. Other things that were, notable, I guess, the settings were all very, very standard. The idea that Viper had with this tournament is he wanted to make it as player-focused as possible. essentially, okay, this is what Viper wants as a player, in a tournament. This is what he would want to play in. And essentially, we all just made that happen, as in Chrazini and me and Keagan, who did the graphics. But with that said, just a basic Civ draft, no bans, no snipes, no nothing. If you prepare a Civ and strategy, then you can play it. No one's going to stop you from doing that, unless they prioritize, a Civ or map first. There was a map ban, but the overall map pool, we tried to make it as, I guess let me move my face a little bit, as classic as possible. Page just got updated. Maybe Jordan gets a country now. Does Jordan get a country now? No, Jordan doesn't get a country now. We'll never know where Jordan's from. But as I was saying, the focus was on classic maps, but not to the point where we didn't want a very diverse map pool. So we have Arabia, we have Arena, and we have Nomad, which are like the 3 most popular maps by far. I mean, Arabia, obviously, by a long shot, and then Arena and Nomad, 2 and 3, respectively. Those were kind of like no-brainers. And then beyond that, controversially, we wanted to have islands in there, and if I had to do it all over again, I would put islands back in the map pool. It's just such a core part of the Age of Empires experience that I don't know, it feels like you can't just have like a classic event without it. That said, we did have a 1 hour and 45-minute time limit, just to make sure that there weren't the super insanely campy games that we saw in previous tournaments and stuff like that. I'll get to the last game of the event in a little bit. But beyond that, Gold Rush, like another very classic map, Regicide Fortress, super classic. Land Madness and Hideout aren't the most classic maps out there. In Atacama, we had kind of like a hybrid version of the map. These aren't like the most classic maps in the world, but we also wanted to make sure that we had a diverse map pool. I remember Viper especially wanted to have Hideout, just to have a little bit of a different semi-closed map compared to, Arena and Regicide Fortress. Some people were complaining that there were 3 different closed maps, as in walled maps in the event. Personally, I mean, I know I'm a half clown myself, but I feel like Arena, RF, and Hideout are all very different in terms of how they play out. And then Atacama, some people are like, oh, it's not even real Atacama. The Atacama that you play on ladder, that isn't real Atacama. The real Atacama from back in the day is like, it was even more open and with fewer trees that it's like everything was just a tower rush. The wood lines in the middle were so sparse that you could just plop down a tower and just range all of your opponent's wood line. Like, it was about as aggressive as humanly possible. So, is this the most classic Atacama? No. Is it even DE Atacama? No. But I still think it was a good map. It was a fun map. It was kind of like a hybrid between Atacama and Cross. Some people wanted to have Cross. I saw Cross in the map pool. It is a pretty classic map, but honestly, we all agreed that we're kind of bored with it. And yeah, I didn't really feel like watching a bunch more games on Cross right now. It's a great map, but just little tired of it right now. And then some people wanted like a Baltic, Medi, Coastal, Continental for another hybrid map. That's definitely something to consider. Or maybe like a Scandi with some modified resources or something like that. Those are all things to consider. But this is just the map pool we went with. Maybe we would change it if there's a future event. I don't know. But I think it worked out pretty well. And the Nomad version we had was very, very fair. Like, I don't think I saw any Nomad games that were like, oh man, wow, it's complete. This person has all the resources and the next person doesn't have any resources. Chrazini worked really hard to make sure that the Nomad was, as fair as possible for a competitive tournament. And I think it worked out pretty well in that regard. Anyway, switching back to this guy. So it is a new S-tier event. And I think what we were looking to do on top of, having like this very player-focused tournament is that there is a gap in the AoE community, and I think a lot of people were sort of looking for this. Just a standard tournament, very sort of classic settings, open classic, and no real gimmicks or anything like that. Not that, all of the other S-tier tournaments aren't great, because they are, and they each bring something unique to the table, but the closest thing we had is like NAC, unless you count ECL, but that's kind of gone, but NAC, even then, it's not quite the same thing because it's all of us hanging out in Nilly's apartment and being goofy and all that stuff. So this is about as like classic and standard of settings as we can get, and I think people really appreciated seeing that. And as I was pointing out in the middle of the tournament, there's a reason that these settings are so classic, because they produce really good and compelling Age of Empires games that people like playing and people like watching. And from that perspective, I'd say that the tournament was a big success, because it sort of, I think, solidified why these sorts of maps are classic. Not like, this isn't like an exhaustive list of all the things that are classic, but in terms of a good representative sample, I think we were pretty happy with it. Now, to move on to some of the feedback before I ramble on for too long. Bloop, bloop. So yeah, briefly address the Hera drama. Long story short, there was a check-in period that was a little bit before the tournament started. I think it was like a half hour. And Hera didn't realize that he had to do that and ended up oversleeping. It was really unfortunate, but we made the determination that, okay, we can't delay the entire tournament just for Hera, because it would require us to redo the entire bracket, and it would end up bumping somebody who had showed up, because, there were more people who signed up than were there. And the point of the sign-up period is essentially for the reason that you don't want to have a bracket with a bunch of admin wins. So you want to make sure that, okay, everybody who signed up is present, they are here, they are ready to play when the tournament starts. So I think that conceptually that isn't a bad idea. Now, was this very early in the morning for NA people? Yes, because I'm an NA people, and it was very early in the morning. But you have to make some sort of concessions, in a very global community like ours is fortunate enough to be. So again, it just kind of sucks for Hera. You live and you learn. No, like, I don't think that this was the biggest deal in the world, but still felt like I had to mention it. Next thing is seeding. Seeding was done for everybody the same. Like, everybody had the same seeding method. You had your average rating, your current rating and your highest rating averaged out. Very, very basic stuff. Like, that is like the most basic form of seeding possible. And that did have some weird seeding results. Like, I think Lyria was 16 or something like that. Don't have actually the seeding list in front of me. But yeah, I think that there is legitimate criticism that could be made that, okay, having a seeding system based on rating isn't the most accurate in the world. In my mind, in a magical, ideal world, we would do seeding based on previous tournament results. And their AoE tournament ELO, there's like some website that does a pretty good job of quantifying all that. And I think that works out really well if you're doing a tournament with exclusively top players. But for this, I think that I feel like, as an organizer, I feel really uncomfortable having separate seating for like the top players than for everyone else, because this is a 128 person bracket. The point of the event is like everybody shows up, and it's, like whoever, fights their way through to the end wins. I really dislike the idea of like separating certain players in terms of seeding and then just kind of like doing whatever for everybody else. Again, it's okay if you disagree with me on that. It's just I feel really uncomfortable doing that, because, like, okay, we see the top 8. Okay, then the 9th through 16th players are going to be like, And to be honest, I mean, it's a ladder rating. It's not something that is completely inaccessible to people. You can play on the ladder to get a higher rating. It's what tons of people do. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Did we get some like super early exits? Not really. Viper and Yo facing in the quarterfinals, like their 2 top 4 players, they faced in the quarterfinals. It should have been a semifinals. It's not that big of a deal. Anything else? I think, nothing too crazy, honestly. And I think this had the side effect of, okay, maybe you had some higher level players duking out a bit earlier on, but we also just had so many close matches as a result. And what I don't want in a tournament is the seeding system to be done in such a way that it's sort of like a very easy breeze for the top players to all just reach the top, the highest stages and then just have the real tournament at the very end. I feel like, there were some chances for some real upsets, and we did get some real upsets. And I thought that was just, it made for some very entertaining and compelling Age of Empires 2 as far as storylines goes. Again, is it the fairest thing in the world? Certainly not, but it is what it is. We could change it going forward. We could not. I don't know. I certainly don't make the final decision. That would be Viper. Next, Fatorias. So, to recap, the final game of the entire tournament, like the last game between Leary and Yo in the finals, was on islands, and it was another Portuguese versus Italians, and as it happened, came down to Yo winning because he had Fatorias to generate resources, and Leary didn't have any resources, and therefore Yo could make ships, and Leary couldn't make ships, and Yo won. And people are like, Fatoria's so dumb, islands should be banned, Fatorias should be banned, and on the one hand, I don't necessarily disagree, because I really don't like Fatorias. I really, really don't like them. But they're in the game, and I already am like a little hesitant with just having the 1 hour and 45 minute time limit, just because it just feels so artificial. Like, I know that we do the same thing with Nomad rules, but again, I don't know, it just feels, especially if it's like, okay, you just ban Fatorias, like that just feels so weird. It's just such a, it's a core part of Portuguese. That said, I think that people may be complaining a little too much, because the game itself wasn't that long. Like, it didn't even come close to the 1 hour and 45 minute time limit. It was like an hour, 15 hour and 20 or something like that. And the way Mr. Yo had set himself up is that Yo was playing for the long game very early on. Like, when he had map control in mid game, he went over to Leary's island and stole a relic, and then, going into Imperial Age, he had 4 relics to 1. So even if he wasn't Portuguese, he would still have 4 relics to 1, and in like old school island wars, that pretty much would mean he would win the game anyway. Of course, Leary did have a huge navy advantage for quite a while, and I think it's honestly it was just Leary goofing and not being more aggressive when he had the chance. He ended up getting some Treb sniped by bombard cannons. He could have landed way earlier. He could have just been more aggressive in making cannon galleons to knock down Mr. Yo's buildings. There's just a lot of Leary having a lot of galleons and then just like very slowly creeping forward. But Mr. Yo was ultimately able to grind him out because, again, putting Fatorias aside, Portuguese have an insane late game navy. Yo got Karak. He has the extra HP. He has the cheaper gold cost. I think as far as Fatoria wins go, this game wasn't the worst. Does it still feel amazing? Not really. But I think that's more of a Fatoria problem than anything else. But that's not our department, so to say. I still think that there were tons of great Islands games, and I personally think that there is value to having Islands. And before I get to the last thing, which is the simultaneous matches, which is, I think, kind of the biggest one, I do just want to quickly, I forgot to write it down, but Civ matchups and Civ diversity. Again, this is a very player-focused tournament, and what players are going to want is to be able to practice with a very, specific set of civs, and that will necessarily result in very little civ diversity. Like, if pros get their way, they'll have, as close to the same settings every single match as possible. And I think that that's part of the reason why we do have this in one weekend, because it prevents stuff from getting really stale. And I didn't think that anything got really stale, even if we did see a lot of the same matchups over and over again. Arabia, Aztecs, Mayans, Chinese. On Atacama, it was like Lithuanians, Japanese. On Islands, Italians, Portuguese, Vikings. It goes on. Nomad was Malians and Spanish. Now, personally, I think that this is the pros selling a lot of other civs short and not really being as willing to experiment with something else. But that's just my opinion. I am not a pro. I am a pleb. Personally, I would like, if possible, to have like a little bit more civ diversity, but then you sort of get into threatening the competitive integrity of the event. I mean, yeah, there are things you can do, but Viper's idea was a very player-focused tournament, and I think that we got so many good games that the civ diversity issue wasn't really an issue. Anyway, the final thing is simultaneous matches. So for the first 2 days, so for the round of 128 through the round of 8, matches were essentially scheduled simultaneously. So if you wanted to catch a specific match, you had to rely on somebody somewhere streaming it, and then you had to watch that streamer. This was very good for people like me who are a smaller caster to get us exposure. Like I had hit an all-time viewer high without like a huge host at like 561 because I was casting Doubt Leary when like very few other people were. So it's great for me personally, but I understand that people feel cheated in terms of, okay, we can't see everything. And on the one hand, most of the time in tournaments, it's like, okay, most matches aren't worth watching. They're all blowouts. But then this tournament, turns that around as like, okay, well, what if there are so many super close matches and you just can't see them all? And I think that's fair criticism. I do think that the core of this event is it's a one weekend thing. I think that expanding it to 2 weekends, it's certainly not impossible. But also, by the way, I'm speaking right now as Ornlu the individual. I am not representing Chrazini or Viper in any way. This is just me. Expanding it to 2 weeks, yeah, you could do it. Personally, I think that I would like to see the quarterfinals played, not simultaneously, the other one, in succession from one another. I think you can do up to the round of 16 simultaneously and just have different people's covering and different people streaming. And I think that's kind of fun, right? You get to follow certain players you want, and Age of Empires, we don't normally do this because it's very sort of like, okay, we're having like a month-long tournament. But yeah, I think maybe having it start on Thursday and then just having that extra day be the round of 8. I think that's something that you can do. We also had the third place match. Some people liked it, some people didn't. I think people didn't realize that the point of the third place match was just to give time to the second semifinal, or the second finalist, who in this case was Leary, because Leary had just played Jordan. And so he would have to go from just playing Jordan to playing Mr. Yo in the finals when Mr. Yo had a break. So this was just essentially to give Leary a break and to, add a little bit of extra time in that way. So that's really all it was. So I stand by that. It's just a little best of 3. Again, it's not the biggest of deals. It's fun. It's still settings. You get to see Tato and Jordan play, and that was all good. But beyond that, I think that if you are, really upset that there were a bunch of games going on, I kind of get that. And I feel like other than just maybe expanding it to 4 days would be having a better sort of centralization of, okay, who is streaming what and where. I know there were some issues with a lot of casters covering the same matches because streamers are going to want to cover the most popular players because that's who people want to see. Personally, I did my very best to cover matches that weren't being streamed by other people, just because, I'm staff for the event and I want to make sure that as many matches as possible are getting covered. But even so, I think that if there was some way, there is a fly like right next to me. Anyway, if there is some way to sort of give people like a landing place to be like, okay, here are all the matches that are going on right now. Here are the people who are streaming them. That's something I think that we could really consider for, a future iteration of this event. But sort of wrapping this up, going forward, I think this event was a success. I don't really think you can say otherwise. And I think there were just a lot of really fun games. Sure, there were some bumps along the way. Personally, I have no idea or inside info on this. I'd love there to be another one, next year or whatever. I feel like it could really... The Open Classic really has a established nice niche in the AoE2 tournament scene. And I'm really happy to be a part of it. I'm, proud of the work that we did, essentially. And by we, I mean Chrazini being a beast mode with the admin, and then Keagan with the amazing artwork, and then Viper with all the promotion stuff, and then Ornlu taking credit for doing not as much. But regardless, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you so much to everyone who's watching it. Of course, thank you to Viper for organizing it, and then Surfshark coming in with the extra sponsorship, adding to the prize pool at the very end. Microsoft also contributing to the bulk of the prize pool. So shout out to all of them. And thank you for watching this review. Hopefully my rambling wasn't too long or annoying. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.